In the year of our Lord of 610, Muhammad received from whom he believed to be the Archangel Gabriel a new revelation from God. That would be the beginning of the Islamic faith. After 12 years of preachings in the city of Mecca, he and his followers were forced to migrate to the city of Medina, escaping severe persecution inflicted by the local polytheists. This migration marked the consolidation of Islam not just as a new religion, but as a unified socio-political force, and a really expansionist one. By 630, following years of armed conflicts with the local Bedouin tribes, Muhammad returned to conquer Mecca. When he passed away, only 2 years later, almost all of the Arabian Peninsula was unified under Islam. That was possible because the tribes were fractured and were always fighting each other. So, following his death, his successors directed this newly unified force outwards. They were able to capitalize on the mutual exhaustion of the two great superpowers of the time, which were the Byzantine and the Sassanid Persian empires, which had spent decades grinding each other down in brutal, almost apocalyptic wars. Between 636 and 642, Arab armies rapidly conquered the Levant, including the holy city of Jerusalem and the rich agricultural lands of Egypt, stripping the Byzantine Empire of its wealthiest and most valuable provinces. By 651, the Sassanid Empire had completely collapsed, and Persia was annexed to the Islamic territory. The momentum carried the Muslim forces westward, across the harsh desert of the Maghreb in North Africa. From 670 to 709, they faced some resistance from indigenous Berber tribes, but in the end, the Berbers were assimilated into the Islamic faith. These formidable desert waters would soon become the very spearhead of the invasion of Europe. The speed of the Islamic territorial expansion reached its most astonishing pace in the Iberian Peninsula. In 710, only 100 years after Muhammad had received the revelation, a Muslim army of roughly 7,000 men, composed mostly of newly converted Berbers, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. What they found here was a crumbling army. They killed the Christian monarch in battle, what followed was a lightning-fast conquest. Within mere 7 years, by 718, the vast majority of the Iberian Peninsula had fallen under Islamic control. This breathtaking speed was made possible by several converging factors. The ruling Visigothic Kingdom were deeply unstable, heavily fractured by constant civil wars, dynastic succession disputes, and widespread famine. Furthermore, the Visigothic nobility faced sort of an identity crisis, which was a Germanic kingdom which embraced Christianity and ruled over a Hispano-Roman majority. Since the end of the Roman rule of Iberia, there was a diversity of cultures which did not assimilate one another, causing some social instability in the region. Consequently, the invading Muslims were seen by the Christians just as another group of people coming in. They heavily utilized diplomacy and treaties of capitulation So, if a city surrendered peacefully, local leaders would keep their lands, their local laws, and even their religious practices in exchange for a pledge of submission and tribute. Christians and Jews were granted some privileges for being people of the book. They were not forced to convert to Islam. They were allowed to maintain their churches and synagogues, and they were governed by their own religious courts, at least in civil matters. But in return for the state protection, they were required to pay heavy taxes. And those who resisted the conqueror, well, they would face enslavement, expropriation, and all sorts of aggression. At the time, it looked like Europe would be entirely under Islamic rule within a few decades. Yet, despite this overwhelming success, the Islamic expansion eventually met its limits. A crucial point of resistance emerged in the northern mountains of Asturias. There, a small group of Visigothic nobles, led by a man named Pelagius, found natural protection from the advancing Muslim armies. In 722, at the Battle of Covadonga, utilizing the harsh terrain to their advantage, they inflicted the first significant military defeat upon the Muslim forces in Iberia. This victory established the independent Kingdom of Asturias and planted the vital enduring siege of the Reconquista, a Christian military campaign that would take nearly 800 years to be completed. Finally, the aggressive northward push of the Umayyad armies into the heart of Europe was halted. After crossing the Pyrenees into Frankish territory, the Muslim cavalry uh, were intercepted and defeated by the infantry of Charles Martel. This monumental clash marked the permanent end of Islamic territorial expansion into Western Europe. We are going to talk more about the fight between Franks and Muslims in the future when we make a series telling the history of Spain, and obviously when talking about France. But now let's go back to the Reconquista. After the victory in Covadonga, Pelagius established the Kingdom of Asturias. It had no access by land to the rest of Christian Europe, and its mountains were not exactly the best place to grow any food, so they had to expand to survive. The opportunity came as the Umayyad emirs in the south got busy dealing with internal rebellions. You remember that the main force of expansion in the Iberia were the African Berbers, right? Well, they were not happy to see most of the lands they conquered being given to Arabs. Islam was about 100 years by that time, so the bond of religion was not strong enough to avoid conflict, especially between those who were enemies just decades ago. Also, a fast expansion means a vast amount of land to impose your rule on. So, when the internal conflicts start to grow, there's an opportunity for the Asturians. The northern Christians began a slow, agonizing campaign southward. By the middle of the 9th century, under kings like Afonso III, the Asturians expanded their borders to the Duero River. They deliberately created a vast, depopulated no man's land, a strategic, a strategic buffer zone that protected the north from sudden cavalry strikes. In 9100, reflecting their growing confidence and expanding territory, the Christians moved their capital south from the mountains to the ancient Roman city of Leon, which gave name to the Kingdom of Leon. Simultaneously, a profound spiritual awakening transformed the nature of this territorial struggle. In the early 19th century, a monk in the far west region of Galicia discovered the lost tomb of St. James the Apostle. Also, the Christians who in the beginning believed the Muslims be just like would be just new rulers, not much different from the Visigoths, now realized the struggle of living under Islam. They started to rebel, and the Reconquista was no longer just a war for land and survival, it was elevated to a holy crusade. Saint James became the celestial patron of the Christian armies. His name was used as a battle cry that would echo across the peninsula for centuries. To the east of Leon, the local lords built a dense network of stone fortification. This heavily militarized frontier zone became known simply as the Land of Castles, or Castile. The County of Castile grew increasingly autonomous, eventually breaking away from the political control of Leon to become an independent kingdom. When telling the story of Spain, we will get deeper on the history of Castile and also on Navarra, Aragon, Pamplona, everything. But now it is just important to know that Castile and Leon were the two main Christian powers on the west side of Iberia. But the wheel of history turned violently in 1031. The once mighty Caliphate of Cordoba collapsed, shattering into dozens of small, fractured, and mutually hostile Muslim states, known as the Taifas. The geopolitical balance of the peninsula flipped overnight. The Christian kingdoms of the north, now highly militarized and experienced due to the constant warfare, seized the absolute advantage of the situation. Instead of facing devastating raids, Leon, Castile, and Aragon began demanding payments of gold from the wealthy but militarily weak Taifas in exchange for protection. This influx of southern gold fueled a massive Christian resurgence, setting the stage for one of the most pivotal figures of the era, Alfonso VI. After a bitter and bloody succession crisis against his own brothers, in 1072, Alfonso successfully united the crowns of Leon and Castile. Commanding the combined military forces of the two most powerful Christian realms, he did not just want tributes from the Muslims, he wanted dominion. He was self-proclaimed the Emperor of all Spain. He systematically squeezed the Taifa kingdoms, using relentless military pressure to weaken them. For years, Alfonso had surrounded and isolated the grand city of Toledo, which was the ancient capital of the Visigothic Kingdom. Its capture was his ultimate prize. In May of 1085, starving and abandoned by its Muslim allies, Toledo was surrendered to Alfonso. The fall of Toledo sent shockwaves across the Mediterranean world. It proved that the Christian advance was no longer just a series of border raids, it was an unstoppable tide of conquest that had pierced the very heart of the peninsula. Terrified by Alfonso's power, the remaining Taifa kings cried out for help. The armies in North Africa crossed the sea in an attempt to halt the Christian emperor. Alfonso needed help to protect all the land he seized, so he called from all of Europe for warriors, and two French nobles did answer his call. Those were Raymond and Henry of Burgundy, two cousins who were not expecting to inherit anything, then went to pursue some glory in Spain. And they were not frustrated. In fact, Alfonso married them two daughters of him. Raymond married Urraca and received the country of Galicia. Meanwhile, Henry married Afonso's bastard daughter, Teresa, and to him was given the country of Portugal. Now we're finally getting where we want, right? Portugal, as you have noticed, resembles Portugal. Oh, that's not coincidence, right? The great Kingdom of Portugal started its life just as a small county. And in the next video, we're going to show how Henry were able to stabilize the county and how a war between his wife, who was the ruler of the country after his death, and his son gave birth to this amazing nation, right? Now we have all the context we need. In the next video, we are going to talk about the first king of Portugal and show how a man created this great kingdom by basically by beating up his mother.